C7 Extra.
Welcome to ABC 7 Extra Sunday. Good evening, everyone. I'm Mark Ross. Early voting is underway for next Saturday's runoff election to choose 5 new city representatives and a new mayor. Tonight here on Extra, you'll hear from the 2 candidates who want to be El Paso's next mayor, Renard Johnson and Brian Kennedy. And as we did with our interviews before the primary, we're interviewing the candidates in alphabetical order by last name. So we begin with businessman Renard Johnson. Mr. Johnson, welcome to ABC 7 Extra.
Thank you for having me, Mark.
If you're elected, you would become the 3rd mayor in recent history with a background in business. Steve Margot and, of course, our current mayor, Oscar Leeser, the 2 predecessors. Explain how your background as a business owner would help you as mayor.
Yeah, so as a business owner, I've done a number of things in the community. Economic development would be my strong suit. So economic development, business, I know how to read budgets, I know how to read financial plans, I know how to do a number of things, but giving back to the community. But I think as a business person, what you're going to get is someone that can unite people, bring people together, and set a vision and move people forward. So that's what business people bring to opportunities like a mayor.
How would you balance running your company with being mayor? Would you be a full-time mayor?
Yeah, so being a mayor of El Paso is going to be a full-time job. I can never 100% step away from my business because I am a defense contractor, and there's certain things that are tied to me individually, like security clearances and things like that. So, but I'm going to step away and be a full-time mayor. I'm very fortunate and blessed to have a strong management team in place that can run my company. My company is 30 years old, so it kind of runs itself now. And then I'm also very happy to say that my father is still in there running the company.
Well, that's good. In your campaign messaging, both online and in your mailers, you say El Paso has the highest property taxes in the state. However, according to the nonpartisan research group Tax Foundation, in 2022, El Paso had the 2nd lowest median home property tax payments of the 10 most populous counties in the state. Now, at the same time, property values in El Paso continue to rise. So how can you lower property taxes when home values keep going up?
Yeah, so what we have to do is we have to focus on economic development. We have to bring in more of a commercial-based El Paso to offset your residential taxes. What I can tell you, Mark, is knocking on thousands of doors, people don't feel that. They know that their taxes are too high. In El Paso, it's roughly 70% of the taxes fall on the residents, 30% falls on the commercial side. We have to flip that. Cities like Austin, it's 70% that falls on the commercial, 30% on the residents. So we have to start moving that, and the only way to do that is bring in a commercial business and commercial opportunities to El Paso to offset that. So that's the way we're going to focus on that.
And you mentioned Austin, Travis County has higher property taxes than El Paso, and it's almost 70% business, 30% residential. That's something just to bring up here. Now, you know, we have had a few successes as far as bringing in businesses, like the growth of Eaton for one thing, TJ Maxx Distribution Center for another. But taxpayers really haven't felt any effects.
Yeah.
Where would you say they failed where you could succeed?
Well, you know, what I can tell you is it's got to be leadership, because we are the 6th largest city in Texas, and we're not the only ones faced with this issue or this problem. So other cities and other counties have figured this out. So we have to figure it out as El Paso. We have been stuck in this position for way too long, and we deserve more opportunities. So I think once I get in there and I start looking at the budget and I look at the problems that may be ahead of me, we're going to get this figured out, because we're not the only ones unique to this problem.
And of course, you're only going to be able to work on this budget in a sense because it's not one that you helped to craft.
That is correct. And in fact, the budget is already in place. The first budget that I'll get an opportunity to work on will be the 2026 budget. So this one's already in place, and I have to work on the next one, which will be my budget.
All right. Now let's talk about economic development. For years, the city has used what's called 380 incentives to attract businesses to come to El Paso. The incentives are tied to jobs and salaries, and businesses get tax breaks, but they haven't always worked. As mayor, how would you ensure that a 380 agreement is followed to the letter?
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about a 380 agreement. And those are tools that, when they're used correctly, can be very effective. You don't have to give every company a 380 agreement. For example, I think companies that are going to bring higher paying jobs to our community, that are going to employ lots of people, those are the ones that we could look at providing 380 agreements, but not everyone needs a 380 agreement. And we have to make sure that when we give out a 380 agreement, that there is oversight, and we're really going in and looking at making sure that they're doing what they say they were going to do with the 380 agreement. For example, if they say they're going to provide 2,000 jobs, we need to make sure that they provide the amount of jobs that they say they were going to provide. Or if not, they shouldn't get the 380 agreement. But 380 agreements are very, very effective tools, and most Texas cities use that. And we're going to be in competition against other Texas cities that are using 380 agreements. We just have to be careful that we use it, and we use it in the right way.
Can a 380 agreement be revoked if that business doesn't follow what they said they would do?
I think there's certainly, and I don't know if it can be revoked, but I certainly know there's ways of looking at it and saying you didn't meet these certain objectives, and because you didn't do that, we may not make a milestone or make a payment to that 380 agreement.
Now, with the median income in El Paso at $55,000 a year, what is your plan to bring in better paying, higher paying jobs to El Paso?
I think we are uniquely positioned in the aerospace. In order to get to space, I'm going to use a couple examples here. If you look at Blue Origins to our east out in the Van Horn area, and you look at Virgin Galactic to our north and to our west, the only way you could get to those two locations is you have to come through El Paso. El Paso can be the aerospace capital of the Southwest. We have the Advanced Manufacturing and Aerospace Center at UTEP. We have an aerospace center out near the airport. So we can capitalize on those types of jobs to raise that median income, to give our youth better opportunities, and to give El Pasoans more opportunity to do more in our community. So I think aerospace is one. In addition, Mark, we can focus on tech, and we can focus on medical. You look at, we have a cancer treatment center that's going to be coming to our region. I think that's a game changer. Those are the types of jobs we need in our region. For every one doctor we employ, it has 4 positions that it creates. So we can look at doing that and look at doing more of that. And I think that will be a landscape that will change El Paso.
Of course, we had air defense here in El Paso at Fort Bliss for many, many years. Is there a way to bring back some of those air defense companies if they're involved in aerospace?
Mark, I think, and I haven't thought of that, but I think you're spot on, because we lost our air defense artillery to Oklahoma, and we should be the capital of airspace. You have over 1 million acres here at Fort Bliss. You have over 2 million acres at White Sands, a test facility. We are one of the largest test facilities in the nation, if not in the world. We can do more. I plan on working with our partners at Fort Bliss. I plan on working with aerospace companies to sell El Paso, to say this is what we have to offer. But I think it's important to note that in order to do that, you have to leave El Paso, build these relationships to get them to come here to see how wonderful our community is and how much more we can do.
We've been dealing with flat population growth for a number of years, and even longer than that, what's called the brain drain, watching college students graduate from here but not stay here. How do you plan to combat that?
It goes back to economic development, it goes back to quality of life, and it goes back to making sure that we can give our youth a livable wage. We need to make sure that, for far too long, Mark, we have marketed our community as cheap labor. We're not cheap labor. We're a very, very good community, and we should be paying what it's worth for our students. For example, I know that the majority of the engineers that graduate from the College of Engineering at UTEP can get almost 100% job placement at Lockheed Martin in Fort Worth. We need to create those opportunities right here in El Paso and keep our youth here, and we can do that. We need to retain and expand our local small businesses. We need to give them the tools that they need to expand. So there's a lot of opportunity we have that will keep our youth right here in El Paso. And in fact, I have 2 young daughters that I would love for them to come back to this area and live in El Paso and be able to make a livable wage.
Now, you've cited La Nube, the new children's museum, as a good example of a public-private partnership. Can you talk about other areas where you think the city could take advantage of other public-private partnerships?
I think La Nube is a prime example of what we can do when you work with public and private money. I think there may be some opportunity with the deck park where there'll be some public-private opportunity that we can look at. But at the end of the day, we want to make sure that, the goal is to lower your taxes and not increase your taxes. So the more we can get public money, private money, and federal money and state money involved, the better it is for us as taxpayers. So those opportunities I know will come, And I know there's a lot of businesses that want to do more in El Paso. And as we get to those opportunities, we're going to do more in public-private partnership.
Now, the controversial downtown arena would have been a big investment for taxpayers, and it was proposed as an economic development driver. Would you have a big signature project in mind to drive the economy?
You know, I've got a couple that are in mind that, you know, I will work with private industry to try to bring. I think your downtown is your front door to your community. It's one that sparks economic development throughout the rest of the community. There's going to be a significant amount of opportunity once I get in office and I reach out to my relationships and say, hey, look, we're open for business in El Paso. We want you to come to El Paso. We're ready to move and we're ready to do things here. And if you keep in mind, we are the 6th largest city in the state of Texas. And we're number 22, number 23 in the United States. But we've been stuck for far too long. So now we have opportunity to move our community forward.
Now, if you are elected, you would be coming in just as President-elect Trump is taking office. As mayor, what would you do to work with the Trump administration, especially with their take on border issues, including tariffs and their plan to conduct mass deportations?
Yeah, let's break that into a couple pieces. As a business guy, I know what tariffs will do to our region and to our community. We can't afford to tax. We're one of the largest gateways from Mexico, and that goes throughout Texas and other parts of the U.S., but we can't afford to raise it 25% because that would be devastating for El Paso and in our region, because that cost ultimately gets passed along to the consumer. What we have to do, Mark, is you know, immigration is going to be a tough issue, you know, and this isn't the first time that President Trump was in office. He was in office before. So we know what he did before, and now he's talking what he will do this time. So it would be very important for me to work with not only our local, state, and federal officials to make sure we can come up with a plan, but most importantly, Mark, I think is we have to dispel any falsehoods about El Paso, and I will be the strongest advocate on all the news media saying this is not true, this is what's happening in El Paso. And I don't think any of this should fall on the back of the taxpayers. In addition to this, Mark, I don't think we need to use any of our local police resources, public safety officers, specifically police, to enforce immigration. We don't have the bandwidth, we don't have the resources. We're already short 400 officers. We cannot be enforcing immigration. So that would be off the table for me. We don't have the men and women in uniform to do that. So we know what's going to happen, but we have to start planning for it now. We cannot wait and see. We have to start working together. I plan on working with our officials in Juarez, Mexico, to come up with a plan to make sure that our region is, number one, safe, protected, and that we're following the letter of the law.
Now, you talk about the lack of police officers. How would you want to grow the police department?
Yeah, so that's through retention. I think, you know, we need to make sure that El Paso remains a very safe city. That would be my number one thing that we have to focus on. But I think there's ways we can do to retain our police officers, because what's happening, Mark, is we'll graduate them from our academies and they ultimately leave to other communities. I'm just going to say Las Cruces or Midland and other areas. And I think what we have to do is we have to look at, one of the officers told me, Bernard, I've been with the force for 15 years. Just allow me to take my vehicle home in the evenings. By allowing him to do that, it reduces crime in their neighborhood. So things like take-home vehicles. We can look at daycares. We can look at some tax incentives for our public safety officers. So there's a number of things we can do with our men and women in uniform, specifically our public safety officers, for retention. And we can look at teachers and doctors and so on, but specifically that's what I would do there.
Talk about what you want to do about El Paso's streets, which you and I both know are a mess.
Yeah, so it costs about $40 million to maintain the infrastructure. And you are hitting on the number one and number two thing that I hear when I knock on doors. When I knock on doors, number one thing that I hear is taxes. Number two or three is going to be infrastructure. We have to make sure that our roads are repaired. Your voters and the people in El Paso are complaining and saying our roads are not being fixed. That's with the current administration. When I come in, we got to look at finding, they only budgeted $12 million to fix our roads. So we're short about $28 million to get these roads fixed. We have to find the money. I have to scrub the budget. I have to look for alternative ways of funding this to make sure that we fix the roads, because that's what El Pasoans want.
Last question for you. Your campaign has received hundreds of thousands of dollars in contributions from conservative political action committees from Austin, most notably Protect and Serve PAC and Project Red Texas. Now, as ABC7 reported, that's fine and legal, but we haven't seen that in mayoral candidates before, in campaigns before. Talk about that strategy and the impact on your campaign.
Yeah, what's super exciting, Mark, is that there's over 600 donors that have donated to my campaign. They're super excited about the future of El Paso. They're super excited about what we could do together as a campaign. I can tell you that my smallest donor is $1, 4 quarters, or 10 dimes. I have donors from teachers to small business owners across the gamut. Let's talk about the reason why the Political Action Committee got involved. That was something completely outside of my campaign's control. My opponent was actually caught on a hot mic where he had mentioned that police and fire could take their endorsement and stick it, somewhere, and that's what caused that action to happen. So we didn't organize, or we didn't work with the Political Action Committee, Protect and Serve, to do that. That's the reason why they got involved with my campaign.
All right. Bernard Johnson, candidate for El Paso mayor, thank you very much for coming on ABC7 Extra.
Thank you for having me.
When we come back, my one-on-one with the other candidate for El Paso mayor, Brian Kennedy. You're watching ABC7 Extra Sunday.